In this video, I want to share a little bit about something that I promise I will relate to learning music, so please just stick with me. This summer, I worked at another summer camp, a different one than last summer, and at the end of the staff training week, there was a campfire at which I had some really interesting conversations. The staff hung out for a while, but then after most of the staff had left, and there were only just some of us still hanging out around the fire, one of the staff did this little activity with us. She told us each to grab a leaf. And actually, I can't remember if she told us to just pick one up off the ground or if she handed them to us herself, because we all had the same kind of plantago leaf, including her, which I think was the point. Because then she said, "You might think a leaf is just a leaf, right? Nothing special in particular about it. Well, let's see what you think after this." Then the first thing she told us to do was name our leaf. I can't remember what everybody else named their leaves, but I want to say that they were all plant-based puns. Like one guy named his leaf Leif Erikson, and I named mine Rudy. Once we went around and shared the names that we had chosen for our leaves, then we went around again and again, each time sharing something, a little fact or imagined story that would add to our leaf's character. What's their favorite kind of music or favorite song? Who's their crush? What's their hobby? Things like that. And after we did that, she took our leaves in a little pile. She turned around, mixed them up, and then turned back around and held them out in her hand and asked us if we could still find our leaf. We, of course, all found our leaf very easily. At least that's how it looked to me. I definitely recognized mine right away, but everyone else looked just as sure when picking out theirs. After spending time thinking about that leaf, that particular leaf, and its story, its features, to try to come up with plant-related puns and aspects of its character, it was very easy to recognize that leaf, which might have otherwise been indistinguishable from the others. I got to know that leaf in my own way. We all did. The guy who named his Leif Erikson is a history and government teacher, so I'm sure that probably played a role in why he chose that name. He knows who Leif Erikson is, probably from reading about him, and the only reason I'm even aware of Leif Erikson is because of a reference in a SpongeBob episode. On the other hand, I chose the name Rudy because I play music, and in trying to think of a pun, root, like the root of a chord, was the first thing that came to mind. And I also play guitar. E is the lowest note, so Rudy was a natural choice for me. We all have different ways of absorbing and perceiving and apperceiving new things, of learning new information and integrating it into the web of knowledge, skills, insights, and intuitions that we already have. These differences in the ways that we understand and perceive could be influenced by what language we speak or our culture and how that shapes our worldview, but it could also be influenced by many things because we're individuals, each with our own experiences that feel personal to us. Now, this activity was explained kind of as a metaphor that represents connecting with people. And I think there's a lot of room for interpretation there. Maybe the power of connecting with people who you know nothing about. Maybe people who you feel you don't have any individual or meaningful connection to, and kind of just see them as a group or a category. Maybe it's a demonstration of how, if we can become so easily familiar with something as different from us and as seemingly indistinct from each other as a plantago leaf, by engaging with their story, even if it's a story that we made up in this example, why shouldn't we be able to do that with people? To know them, really know them, on their terms, considering who they are and understanding them better in their words, in their actions, all contextualized through the rest of what we know about their character. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering why I'm talking about this. Why did I decide to tell this story about leaves? And I promised I would relate it back to learning music, so here it is. Personal connection. When we learned about our leaves, we learned them in a personal way. Without even having the goal in mind, we became familiar enough to distinguish our leaf from the others because we came up with ways of recognizing that leaf that, whether we knew it or not, were personal to us, things that we related to in some way or another. And that process was creative. We created a story that connected us to that leaf. It might sound a little goofy, touchy-feely, new agey, whatever, but really I think we just don't do this enough. Consider what I said earlier about how we all perceive and absorb new things differently based on the totality of who we are, our cultural differences, the languages we speak, different values, priorities, and many specific experiences. In Orthodox music education, we are largely taught one way from a certain paradigm. And with so many different types of music that people want to learn and different musical goals that people have, that one paradigm or way of understanding can't be totally sufficient, or rather, we could benefit in achieving our musical goals by thinking creatively about music theory, coming up with our own models, analogies, terms, applications of concepts, etc. Even if we acknowledge that certain standard ways of communicating about theory have their uses, engaging with new ways of looking at the same information could help us perceive it differently and ultimately form our own intuitions, insights, and connections to that information more deeply, maybe. As an example, in some of my videos about diminished chords, I use earth, wind, and fire as names for the diminished chords in a model that's based on the color wheel model from the now defunct MetaHarmony channel. Side note, as I understand it, not only does the MetaHarmony channel not exist anymore, but all the videos that Tom had put up also don't exist anymore. He deleted them from his computer. They're gone. So I'm really glad that I did make videos that in part explain something really important to what MetaHarmony was. But do you think that I labeled the diminished chords differently with the terms earth, wind, and fire rather than the primary colors because there's anything special or better about my terms than Tom Glazebrook's, or because I think that there's anything better about my version of the model than his? The answer is no. And I say as much in the video on the elements. Actually, I say in many of my videos that I want to hear what other people's ideas are on conceptualizing these things, terms and analogies that they might have. Because maybe I connect with someone else's ideas even more than what I currently have. Another reason that I come up with some of the terms and explanations that I do is to give story and dedicated ways of communicating about things for which I previously had no dedicated terms. And that makes the concepts easier for me to think about. So instead of saying, oh, here I'm just playing, the whole tone scale that has the flat six of the key in it, I just be like, lunar scale. Or instead of saying something like, the diminished that contains the flat nine of the dominant that resolves to the next chord, I just be like, Pierce diminished. We're just going Pierce to this chord right here. Now again, the point isn't to say that my ways of conceptualizing and labeling things are necessarily better than anyone else's. They've been useful to me, and I think they've been better than not having them at all, but I don't think that they couldn't stand to be improved, or that different analogies, terms, and so on could be even more useful. But I do hope that my videos and ideas spark creativity in you, the same way that the teachings of people like Barry Harris and many others with unorthodox approaches have perplexed and inspired me to codify these concepts differently than I often see them taught. So, please share. All right. See you later.